Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmby, and this is a meeting house in North Yorkshire. This is Airton Friends Meeting House. It occurred to me that in all these videos, we've had one on a congregational chapel, we've had several on Roman Catholic churches, but mostly been Anglican. And the Quaker Meeting House is a type of building that's quite unique to the denomination. Airton is one of the very earliest. It originated as a barn. When the barn was built, we don't know, perhaps in the 16th century, perhaps early 17th century. But by the 1640s, it was being used as a meeting house, not by the Quakers, but by a group called the Seekers. As the name suggests, the Seekers were people who had become dissatisfied with the Church of England, but also they weren't too happy about the Nonconformist church at the time. We must remember that in the 1640s, we're looking at a situation where there is a great deal of religious ferment. There are those, the Puritans, of course, who want to take the Church of England in a more Presbyterian direction. There are Congregationalists, and then there are various sects, and they are many and varied. They range all the way from the ranters who are raging antinomians through to groups who are much more legalistic. The Seekers were effectively, if we may use the expression, religious rebels without a cause. They were dissenters, but they didn't know really they knew what they dissented from, but not what they dissented to. And it's around about 1650 when the Quakers come here to Airton, and they find this little group of Seekers who we're not sure what we are, but we're looking for something. Now, the Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends, founded by George Fox, who is something of an eccentric. There's a biography of him that's called The Man in Leather Breeches. And George Fox we would today think of him as a charismatic. He believes in, not the gift of the Holy Spirit as modern charismatics think, but he believes in what he calls the Christ within the inner light, and the idea that believers have direct communications from God. So on one occasion he's in Staffordshire and he's walking down to go to Lichfield, and he suddenly gets this impression that he should take his shoes and socks off and walk barefoot into the city, crying out, "Woe to the bloody city of Lichfield." And some of these early Quakers in particular thought of themselves almost as being like Old Testament prophets, in fact sometimes altogether as Old Testament prophets. The Quakers have over time changed enormously. Now, American Quakerism is very different in many ways from British Quakerism. The American Quakers, because Quakers are not a close-knit denomination with rules from on high, when they cross the Atlantic they adopt their own character. In Britain also they have their own character. Now, in the latter part of the 19th century, the Victorian era, the Quakers are, many of them, pretty much evangelical. Today they're very, very liberal, because this idea of the inner light, and therefore, of course, the great danger of this inner light doctrine is you end up saying, well, if I feel like I should do it, I shall do it. And this creates a problem, and the modern day Quakers are pretty much Unitarians, most of them, very, very similar to the modern day English Unitarians. But this is early Quakerism. This is, in fact, a building as we see it today is basically as it would have been in terms of the structure, in terms of the fittings, not so much the furnishings, but the fittings, as it would have been in 1710, when there's the last renovation. The old barn is turned into a formal meeting house. And it's interesting, again, you look at the Quakers, they're this very quietistic sect as they become. They're this charismatic sect. They're a sect that doesn't have a formal, for want of a better word, clergy. They have leadership in the local congregations, but they don't have a formal clergy. The ministry in Quakerism is charismatic. And yet they end up with meeting houses. Why? Because it's convenient. Because having a special place where you can meet as a church, as an assembly, as a congregation, then it's convenient, it's useful. It means that if the folk whose parlour you were meeting in die, and their son inherits, and he doesn't like the Quakers, you don't have to go looking for somewhere else to meet. You've got your own building. And that's how church buildings come about. But anyway, that's perhaps a topic to say a bit more on later. But for now, let's have a look around this building. Very simple, the old barn. So as usual, we start at the back. I say the back here because obviously this is a nonconformist meeting house, a very special type, so it doesn't have a west end as an Anglican church would. And this, as you can see before, this is the main meeting room. This is the main space. You've got the benches arranged now in a square around a table. And you can see at the end, that is the stand. We'll see a bit better when we go up to the gallery. The stand is where the elders of the congregation sat, and they would try the ministry. Because it's a charismatic ministry, there's people who come and say, I have a message. And the elders, the experienced leaders of the congregation, they are there and they ask, is this actually a message that it needs to be heard? And that's a very important point, that someone's got to test it. Now, there is a gallery here. One of the points about the galleries is the gallery adds extra seating space, but also it allows for a space underneath, which we will go and see, because it's important. Now, we are here in the Yorkshire Dales. This is in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and therefore upland area. And you can see that it's a nice big fireplace. The architecture here is robustly vernacular. It's local men, local wood, local stone. So we've got this nice big fireplace because we need heating. It's got a painted fire at the moment. The seats up here are modern, but you can see that these ones at the front, these are traditional type Quaker benches. Now here we are, and you can see the stand. All old Quaker meeting houses had them, but in some cases they've been taken out because they're not used anymore. How Quakers do things have changed. A modern Quaker meeting is basically a bunch of people sitting around mostly quietly. It's perhaps very similar to what the Seekers meetings would have been like originally. You can see here this gallery front. This is very much local woodwork, and then a nice fireplace, that probably 18th century, although it may be earlier. The styles don't change very much over time, as you can imagine here up in the Dales. And obviously there's well, it doesn't look very safe up there, but I'm sure it's access for things. And obviously there's a rail to make sure people don't fall over. So down we go again. And the stairs are very much the sort of thing you might find in a farmhouse. Actually, they're a bit bigger than farmhouse stairs. I've seen gallery stairs in Baptist chapels that are much steeper and narrower than that. So this is the stand. So we go up onto the stand, take the stand as it were, and in the stand we've got these old benches, and you can see these are original. This is what benches would have been, the benches would have been like originally. They've been replaced by these modern ones. Now, we look at the gallery here, and you can see underneath there is a room, and the panels are actually shutters. So that room can be used for small meetings, and it can also be opened up so that you've got seating above and below the gallery if you've got a big preacher, which of course the early Quakers, they did. It's not until much later that you get really the end of preaching in Quakerism. But this is one of the earliest Quaker meeting houses in Britain. It's one of the oldest nonconformist buildings in England. And it represents a very particular, not to mention somewhat eccentric, religious tradition. The early Quakers are decidedly Christian. Modern Quakers are much more interfaith, but again because of this problem with the inner light. So here we are inside. Now we'll go down here and go into the back room, which is very much like a farmhouse parlour. Because of course the people who built it would have been used to making farmhouse parlours. The fireplace is original, the grate of course is Victorian, with that nice tiling inside, and you can see this wooden partition here. Of course the other side of that is it's a staircase, and that door leads to a cupboard under the stairs. Little piano for sing-songs. So that's the view from here. You can see here this shutter's closed and that shutter's closed, but this shutter is open. You can see it's suspended from the ceiling, and there's hooks over there for the other shutter. So that's the inside here at the Friends Meeting House at Airton. And this is outside at Airton. You can see behind me it looks like a cottage, doesn't it? These low windows, of course, these represent the main meeting house, and then up here that's the gallery window, and that's the under gallery window. So very, very simple. The door in the middle, above it is the date 1700. That isn't the date the building was built. It was certainly in use in the 1650s. Rather, that's to do with a renovation when it is made really the way it is today. It represents very much this early stage of Quakerism. It's a barn, and it looks like a barn really, and that's deliberate. That's deliberate. It's supposed to look like a barn, partly because it originally is a barn, but also so it gets overlooked if anyone comes and they're unfriendly. They're not going to say, oh, the Quakers are giving themselves airs. They say, oh, it's a barn. It's not deliberately ugly. In fact, it's not ugly at all. It's a really pretty little building, like a little country cottage. So we'll have a look around the grounds and just have a look around the other side to see how it differs there, because that's where the big window is on the inside, well, that lights the main hall. So again, outside here at Airton, there is an adjoining wing. That's now a basically independent hostel, so you can actually book it and stay there if you like on a holiday, and I'm sure it gets quite a lot of visitors. There is, of course, its own burial ground. Quakers preferred to be buried in their own burial grounds, and the Quakers, certainly earlier Quakers, had very much an attitude that we don't believe in using the names of the months, because of course the names of the months are originally pagan. However, these later stones have the month names, having abandoned the older practice. Now, to see if we can find any that have the older dating scheme on them. Now, October. You can find some way it will say, oh yes, 10th. Here we are. 10th of 4th month 1906, and that is your typical Quaker, older Quaker attitude. Now over there, looks like it's probably a mill. The Quakers are of course quite involved in industry. I don't know if they were here, but they become very involved in things like Cadbury's, for example, are founded by Quakers. So that is the back end. You see, you've got this nice big graveyard, and we can go out through the archway into the village street, and there's no church here. It's like a lot of these upland areas. There's a central church and lots of little hamlets and settlements around that. And get out. There we go. Lots of little hamlets and settlements that then depend upon the mother church, which makes things quite handy for early nonconformity, because early nonconformity can then meet in places other than where the... So here we are, this is the front. You see here's the board telling us that meetings are at 2 p.m. on Sunday. So let's try and cross the road here. Well, it's not the busiest road, it is still a road. And so this is, see the wall, there's the one window there for the main meeting house. And then there's the attached house, which at one point I suspect would have been a chapel keeper's house, because you need someone to look after the building, someone to make sure that it's all right. But also, back in the day, you have travelling Quaker ministers, and they need someone to stay, which could either be in the home of a member of the congregation, or quite often it was in a sort of prophet's chamber attached. So that is that on the outside. Just shut the gate here. So you can see there's the part of the graveyard that hasn't been, as far as we can tell, used yet. And overhanging just a single slab of stone there, and underneath we've got WEA something 1700. So that, the outside of this lovely building. So there we have it, Airton Friends Meeting House, one of the oldest meeting houses, and one where the interior is basically intact. And as you can see, that's important because the interior here tells us a lot about how the Quakers worshipped originally, and how it is, although it is a democratic worship, you've still got, it's democracy with leadership rather than free-for-all. It's not anarchy, but it is democracy. The Quakers, as I've said, have changed enormously over the centuries, but this building remains in use, and it's open every day as far as I can tell. So if you're ever up here in North Yorkshire, near Skipton perhaps, then this is a great place to visit. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.